Welcome to Translation Confidential. This is Peter Argondizzo and Patrick Daley, and this is episode 136, How the Cloud Works for You. This is basically our second part of this series, and we're going to focus on translators, and project managers, and managers alike. So just a little open workshop discussion on some things to keep in mind. Patrick, I think you're going to start us off with a news story.
Yep, we frequently bring up Apple on this podcast. So, Apple, if you're listening, we will gladly take your sponsorship dollars. But yeah, I could pick up any device on my desk and it's an Apple one. But they had their Worldwide Developers Conference a couple of weeks ago, and they were going through the features of their new operating system across, I think it's iPhone, iPad, and the Watch. And they released that they are integrating their already existing Translate app into Messages, Phone, and FaceTime. So they did like a cool demo where someone FaceTimed their parents from a different country who spoke a different language, and they spoke into it and it kind of transcribes for you into your native language. And then it also will do an AI voiceover kind of interpretation as well. So pretty cool. I know we've talked about demos like this in the past that are admittedly a little bit flashy, whereas when we dig into the details, it's going to be very interesting to see what the quality of those outputs are. But I think we've come to learn if anyone can do it, it's probably going to be Apple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. I heard a little bit about that, and I think that's great. You know, again, any of those tools that I think are going to help conversation in the moment are really great tools. So I'm anxious to mess around with that and see how it goes. Maybe in a future episode we can talk about it.
Yeah, and it's funny enough. I mean, I remember in college having a few friends whose parents' first language was Spanish and their first language is English, and they get on the phone with their parents, and it's funny to me, but they speak in Spanglish where they kind of go in and out of both of them. So it'll be interesting to see how this maybe removes the need for that, where both sides of the conversation can speak in their native language and still pretty quickly, if not instantly, have that same kind of conversation quality.
It's funny. That's been my life for years, Patrick. So, I mean, with my folks, I swear, you know, with my mom especially, I think we always used to bounce between Italian, English, and Calabrese, you know, our dialect. And yeah, friends would be like, what is that?
What did I just listen to?
It's like every random, there'd be like a random sentence in English, you know, and it's just funny. But I think kind of a cool thing of growing up in a multilingual household for sure. So, all right, well, let's get started. Let's start with, you know, basically, again, the focus now is, I think we were focusing more on the corporate side, like why corporations, like, you know, how translation agencies in specific are set up to utilize the cloud. You know, how are workers doing it now? How are translators, PMs, interpreters? So basically the broad mix. And I think the first topic we want to talk about was flexibility and remote access, right? So again, the whole conversation doesn't make sense unless we talk about COVID as kind of the thing that pushed a lot of companies forward. As we talked about last week, there were a lot of companies that were 100% in office, very proud of it. COVID hits, and now, oh my God, what do? We don't have the security infrastructure. And we're talking about small companies and massive companies. I remember talking to one of our IT guys, and he said for that whole first year of the COVID thing, basically he was working with this IT company. He was just formatting and setting up machines. He had a user list, hundreds of users to set up machines. He'd put it in a box. Another person would come by, put the label on it, and ship out these computers already ready to roll. I mean, you think of these massive organizations that, again, weren't ready for it. They were caught flat-footed. But there are some benefits, right? I mean, sure, that was a huge thing, but now, you know, employees can access their stuff from everywhere. Certainly there's security implications. That's not what we're going to talk about. That was last week. We're not going to talk about that here. But what else, Patrick?
I think even from my time in the workforce, it kind of started out where you leave your computer at your desk every day, and like that's the only place you can get to log on. And now I think it's changed from either you bring your computer home with you or you just bring your personal device and kind of remote into kind of a virtual machine where you can do your thing. It's really not something I think people, I would say my generation and younger, really even think about. It's like, okay, where's my work issued laptop? And like, I'm just going to carry it with me as if it's my own. So kind of changed from having, I think I even started with maybe a tower computer on my desk in the office
Hmm.
for my first couple of jobs, but really the infrastructure to log in remotely pretty much wasn't a thing when I first started out.
No, most people were using like remote desktop protocol or RDP, which yeah, you're accessing another desktop somewhere. I just recently visited a colleague and they still use that infrastructure. Many companies still use that infrastructure. I'm proud to say that there's like one computer here at HQ. It's my computer because I come here every day. Everybody else brings their machine because they're accessing a VDI, a virtual device from wherever they are. And what's nice is that securely gets them onto the network where they can share network resources and files. Our accounting system now, you can only access it unless you're on one of our virtual devices. So that's been locked down. You can try to hit that URL, but you're not going to go anywhere unless you're on our network, which is really cool. I mean, it's the obvious stuff, but I think it's one of those things that maybe you don't see all the benefits until you go all the way in. From our perspective, the company's perspective, will quickly pivot to the workers and translators perspective. The level of collaboration that you have when you're all in, right? So think of we're on an accounting record and I can see, well, there's Kimberly and Mike, they're looking at it as well. I can see their images there. I can jump on a Slack. Guys want to jump on a huddle. We don't even need a phone, right? It's just click the huddle button. The three of us are on a quick chat. Oh yeah, this is what we need to do to fix that invoice or adjust that entry or whatever the case is, and done. Doesn't matter that Mark's in Australia or Virginia's in Argentina or Elizabeth's in Chile. It really doesn't matter. It really, even at our scale, can make us essentially a global company, which 30 years ago would have been unheard of when we started.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point too. I didn't even really think through like we used to have phones on our desk and everyone's email signature used to have a phone number. And a past company I was at, when people were returning to office, they're like, yeah, we got rid of all of those. Let us know if you want a phone number. And there were maybe 3 people who said, hey, okay, we'll take a company phone number. But like those basically just all went away and everything went to whether it's Slack, Zoom, Teams, fill in the blank with whatever conferencing software. But I think that kind of just took away the need for phones, which is kind of mind blowing thinking of how big of an innovation phones were in themselves, and now they're relatively useless.
I mean, absolutely. And that dovetails right into simplified setup, right? So if you think of your example of the phone, I mean, literally someone went back to their desk and went, oh, what's his name wants a phone number. They literally logged in and said, here's a phone number. And they sent them an email and said, here's your login. And you now have a little widget on your desktop. That's your phone. Same thing. We don't have phones here anymore either. And we realized this is the funny thing. So then we realized we're like, oh, I guess we're paying for all these phone lines. And this was maybe a year or so ago. Does anyone even use their phone number? So then we went and pulled a report and the salespeople use their phones. Nobody else uses their phones.
Yeah.
And it's because most people are just like, well, they figure they're going to be on a Teams meeting or they figure it's going to be, chat across Teams, or we even have some clients and some vendors that are in our Slack. So we're just chatting via Slack. So there's so many different ways of doing it, but that simplified setup is what makes it key. We used to have a phone system, just like everybody else had a phone system. And now you needed to add a phone number. Well, you'd either have to have them come out and do it, or maybe they could log in remotely and do it, order a piece of hardware and coordinate with the telecom provider to see if you had enough numbers in your bank or how it was going to be assigned. And it's just so much where now, through systems like RingCentral and Twilio, Call Tower and all the different apps that are out there, or even just Teams telephony. A lot of people just use Teams telephony.
But I mean, to your point too, like Teams and Slack, I know have really good integrations between workspaces. So me as the buyer and you as the provider, we can just like, hey, add me to your workplace on Teams or Slack or whatever it is. And you have a direct line to them. You don't need to email them. You don't need to email them like, hey, can we set up a call? Just quickly Slack them, be like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Let me know if we need to meet. It takes away a lot of like the administrative things that can kind of be simplified, like you said, of just now we're a lot closer together. Even though I know the world's getting more global and global, people are more connected, and it's way easier to get a hold of people much faster.
Yeah, and I would argue, we're all accustomed to these types of interfaces, even the one that we use here for the podcast, where I could potentially share screen and this is recording and our marketing group, Ricky in marketing could use that video for something. Every tool has that, whether it's a Slack huddle, whether it's Teams, whether it's Zoom. So in my mind, well, I could never share my screen on a phone call.
Right.
So if you talk about from a collaborative viewpoint, it is far better. And again, I mean, that's something that you have to stress with that simplified setup is 30 years ago, you know how hard it was like to start a business and have any semblance of technology at a small scale? Incredibly difficult. I mean, now, my goodness, you can get Microsoft Office, you can get Slack, you can get Ring Central, and you can have all the same tools that a larger company uses, but at your scale.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's been a great equalizer, that small business can operate like big business. And I think that means a lot for, if you think of our freelance linguists, our project managers now. I mean, Patrick, right? I mean, when we hired you, we were a Chicago only project management company. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, all our PMs need to be in Chicago, need to come to HQ. So we're not that anymore, with folks all over the place. So, yeah. But that simplified setup is really, I mean, it's, you don't need that phone provider anymore to provision a line, even to provision. I mean, it's easy.
The internet is the new phone. You need the internet to do everything. I think that's kind of the new utility that everyone kind of has to have to be able to function. Which, whether it's good, bad, right, or wrong, we'll see. But that's kind of just the reality that we're in.
And even that, Patrick, was crazy. Like, think of what a T1 line used to. I mean, and I tell people that now. Oh yeah, we used to pay $1,200 a month for a T1. They're like, oh, that must have been fast. I'm like, it was 1.5 meg. I mean, only
thousands of times faster than that
on a cable connection that cost you $60 a month. I mean, now granted, we have fiber here at the office because we want it. It needs to be the same all the time. But even still, the T1 was, essentially you get the same up as down, which that was a big deal. You didn't get that back then, even though if it was 1.5 meg. But you think of that, $1,200 a month. Well, that's kind of nuts for a small business. Now, yeah, you call Xfinity and you can live on just getting regular cable.
I was gonna say I can get my house internet for 12 times over for that much, and
right. I mean, it's crazy.
It's gone way down since then, obviously, and the price has gone way down, and the quality and speed has gone through the roof.
100%. So good.
But the technology. Another example I thought of, especially on the simplified setup thing, is I think like pitching new business or doing presentations becomes that much easier too. Of like, you don't have to incur travel costs and bill back to the client. You don't have to take your people off of other work to burn their time on travel for the day. It's you sit at your desk, whether that's in the office or at home, and you're able to do that presentation as part of your daily work, and you don't need to, again, on either end of it, deal with travel or even tech issues during travel. How many times have you gone to a client office or prospective client office like, how do I plug my computer in? How do I get it on the TV? It's like, no, that stuff just like, that's table stakes now, or it just has to work, and it has to work right away.
It is funny. It's really gotten into all aspects of the business. I think now we just take it all for granted, but you're right. You get to someone's office. Hey, what's your guest Wi-Fi? How do I connect to the TV? Is it Streamcast or whatever it is? Super easy, super simple. It's not a big deal. These things all would have taken an IT person and hours to figure out or set up. Or, I mean, it's like, the coolest thing was if you had an HDMI hanging off the TV.
I remember in college, I think a lot of my classrooms had like the podium that had a ton of jacks on it, like an HDMI jack. And so it's like, oh gosh, which cord do I bring with me to hope that this works when I have to go present on the TV? And I haven't been in a college classroom for quite some time now, but I'm assuming it's much, much easier to hook into the TV and do what you got to do.
Yeah, I recently did an RFP defense at a school district, and they had that high-tech podium. And what was cool is they had it all covered. Like, their IT guys pretty forward-thinking. Like, every cable known to man was there. So whether you were old Mac, new Mac, whatever it was super easy to connect. But the tech has made it that much easier. But again, into the next topic, which is really the fewer tech headaches. When it works, right? But let's talk about when it doesn't a little bit, like when CrowdStrike had their issue, right? I mean, there were so many enterprises that suffered. For those of you that don't recall, CrowdStrike is the security provider for most, it's for most enterprise accounts, essentially. And Microsoft uses CrowdStrike. Most everybody uses some form of Microsoft. Most everybody uses something that touched CrowdStrike. I mean, just as an example, my gym, the gym that I go to, like none of the screens worked. It's Lifetime, so it's a big national conglomerate. None of the screens worked for like a week. Obviously, it was low tech. It was no big deal. But what wasn't low tech was when none of the terminals worked at the airports for people to check in on the kiosks or the agents to do what they needed to do to get people on flights safely and securely. So at a large scale, when the tech doesn't work, it doesn't work. But for the most part, knock on wood, it is pretty solid. And there are fewer tech headaches.
Yeah, I was on a Google Workspace for that one, so I was safe at the time. But a lot of our clients were kind of had those moments. It's like, how much do we have tied to this one thing that can and has gone wrong now? So I think that was eye-opening for a lot of people to just see. It's like, oh, we might need to do something about that and kind of figure out how that doesn't take down our whole system at one time. Because I think that's, like you said, there are fewer tech headaches, I think, on some of the little things, but when you start interconnecting so many different systems and have a breakpoint that can take the whole thing down, that's definitely a risk that's run in the process.
And we've seen it, right? When AWS has an outage, holy cow, nothing works. Like everybody uses some form of AWS for their server paths, and it's like you can't do mobile ordering
like
at
half
Starbucks.
The internet is down.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like almost every e-commerce site. I mean, AWS is kind of the common backbone. And I mean, that's, maybe a downside is that we've all become so accustomed to it. So like the flip side of what we were saying, right? So here I am, I sit down, I'm a remote worker, and something like that happens. Or even just, let's say they don't have internet connectivity. It's like, well,
it's a day off for you.
My phone doesn't work. I can't access HQ. I can't get to any of my files. It's all in the cloud, so I don't have anything downloaded to my machine. Like you say, it's a day off.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock somewhere is what I would say.
That's the unfortunate side of it. But again, I think, overall, we point to the productivity gains, right? And I love, gosh, if we go back to when translation became cloud driven, it's funny to me that not all of them are. And I didn't realize that. There's still some people that very much swap files and say, hey, here's a file, here's a file that's been translated, you edit it, that sort of thing. We've not been in that environment for such a long time that I don't even recall that reality. What I love about that is you can have a complex workflow, say translator, editor, proofreader, so a full TEP workflow, and it's 20 languages. I mean, gosh, you're managing a lot of people there, right? That's 60 people, 3 per language that you'd be managing if it's TEP. And if you had to be the cat herder on that, I mean, that would be terrible. So instead, the cloud tools, it's like the minute a task is done, it messages the next person down line. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think a good benefit there too, though, is by having the ability to make real-time updates, you can have editors follow translators a lot more closely, whereas what you described as kind of the before times was translator does their thing, they're like, cool, I'm done, hands off, give it to the editor does their entire thing. Now the editor can start a lot earlier and follow really closely behind the translator, so that benefits not only the translators and editors and being able to kind of work faster, but also your client delivery time goes down when you have that system in place, and you can get that translation back to your clients faster. So it really benefits everyone on the entire transaction.
Absolutely. And I love that, diving into the weeds on this a little bit, Patrick, because if you think of anything like even like document collaboration using Office 365, and storing everything in SharePoint online, right? It's like I can work on a document and I can, use an @ symbol and say, I don't know, Patrick, what do you think of this, right?
And we can be in that same doc and see you typing and start maybe the next section or whatever it is, or like send you a funny note or correct you in the middle of something. Like that can happen in real time. It's kind of an offline online where like we won't have to be in a meeting for that, but I can just sit and look at the document and see what you're doing in real time.
And delete everything I've written.
Right.
Yes, correct. As
Just make it better. That would be my note.
appropriate, exactly. So, I mean, that level of collaboration just wouldn't be there with all of these extended tools. And if again, you can go down the line back to telephony, how you can quickly do a meeting, and how I can use my cell phone is now my work phone because I have an app on here that runs it. So, again, the backbone of all these things are permissions and settings, and it's all in the cloud. So I know that in some ways this topic is probably in 2025 maybe a little bit trite, but we like to dive into kind of business operations and how things work, and I think it's important to understand how translation agencies do these things.
I mean, it is interesting, right? I think we saw when we talked to Florian a few weeks ago of kind of with AI bringing a lot of maybe tech blind spots to light. I think he mentioned that we might see more M&A, and I think that's something you realize when you go through an M&A exercise is kind of you get a little peek behind the curtain of how other companies are running and operations that you know client off the street or other person may not know until you really get that peek behind the curtain. Um, and and I think it is kind of wild that we can see how some companies have a tech stack that's insanely nice, and then some are like, "Holy cow, how are you doing stuff?" And it kind of blows your mind to see just how different every setup can be.
100%. We're looking for acquisitions right now, and it's crazy how much double entry we see, even triple entry from system to system. Oh, this system doesn't integrate well with this system. And there's a lot of patchwork, a ton of patchwork. And, you'd be shocked in this day and age. So
I mean,
we can make fun of this topic all we want, like, oh, it's a little bit trite, but it's not a foregone
you'd be
conclusion.
surprised. But I
Exactly.
think that all comes down to the J curve of change, right? Is whenever change is introduced, your either buy-in or quality or speed or whatever is going to dip at first, but then it starts to kind of make the Nike logo is how I picture this graph of it kind of dips down a little bit and then we'll go straight up. But like once you hit that inflection point, like I think it pretty much blows people's minds. It's like, oh, why was I doing double or triple entry before? Like that's insane. Like that I was spending so many hours doing that. Like there's got to be a better way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's key. And of course, cloud resources make this all possible. And more importantly, the connection of the various clouds, because it can't all be in one system, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like what Zoho thinks. I think Zoho is one of those things that, we have every system, we make everything. Even those things aren't necessarily all connected, but
That makes
you do have to connect your clouds for sure.
that takes me back to if you're trying to be everything for everyone, you're nothing to no one.
And isn't that the truth with some of these things, right? So like I hear people say like, we use this system, but it doesn't do what we want. Or I don't know that there's any system that does everything you want, but there's also, you talk about the law of diminishing returns. Like you can add as many integrations as you want. You can add as many customizations as you want. But we've also seen there was an acquisition we didn't do actually. We were going to do where the tool really just looked like the users would just keep raising their hand and someone just kept piling stuff on top of it. And it was a Frankenstein of a tool. And you have to be careful, right? Customization of customization's sake or integration for integration's sake alone isn't great. And I would say the same with all these cloud coordination, right? I think, what do we always say, Patrick? Take the business problem and work backwards, and all the other fluff you have to kind of ignore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it. I've used Slack forever now, but I think like Slack's benefit to me is the instant messenger system or the group channel system. Sure, video calls work, but they're not as stable as something like Zoom or Teams that really knock those part of the communications out of the park. But for like a quick message I need to send someone, it's Slack every single time. But if I need to have a call with someone, it's not my favorite for video conferencing. It works fine, but there's other tools that do that much better than they do.
I would agree. You can't be all things to all people. It's just not going to happen. Kind of transitioning into sort of the manager's role and operations and sales and IT leaders. Um, One of the things that think about there is I guess really just kind of overarching all these things we talked about is the flip side, right? So you can get your people queued up so much faster. You can get people on the move, and implemented and operational so much quicker, right? We talked about the IT guy that was, shuffling through those computers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty amazing how quickly you can get someone rolling these days, right? Your IT guys probably have a profile. It's like a checklist. I know we do.
Mm-hmm.
You need this, you need this, you need that. And you just, make it all happen, I guess.
Yeah. And even I think another cool thing is like, again, going back to a translation management system that's in the cloud, that's helpful, one, for project managers to manage all of their projects. They don't need to manually check on certain projects. You've got a nice dashboard view that says this one's in progress, this one's in translation, this one's in editing. But I think from a team management perspective as well, you can see how many projects someone's working on. You can kind of get a sense of their utilization and workload, and that can help you as the manager to make decisions for your people. So they can kind of see all of that and get nice dashboard views or management views or whatever it is to really make those business decisions based on real facts, as opposed to like, oh, so and so said they're busy, so I think they're busy. It's like I can look at the data and see how busy they actually are.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And again, part of the equation that we've been talking about is the technology and just getting people connected. But then from the manager's viewpoint, it's just that, right? Checking bandwidth and having the ability to see across the organization what's going on and where things aren't going on. Maybe it needs attention because there's some issue that's causing a slowdown or a bottleneck, and you can hopefully see that through dashboards. And again, that comes only from connecting the various clouds and getting all that data into one spot. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about like security and compliance controls. I know we were kind of pushing that off a little bit. We talked a little bit about it in our last episode, but certainly having these abilities, like I can think of, for example, for us in meeting our ISO requirements, just having the ability to have a central location where we put our CAPAs, right? Where we put our, hey, we had an issue. This is how we addressed it. This is how we resolved it. Here's the communication to the client. Having that in a central spot. So we can say, hey, how did we do this week? Did we have any issues? What was our on-time delivery? Having that information front and center is key to what we're doing.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, especially on the ISO registration front, but kind of having your systems force you into compliance, for lack of a better term, but like designing your systems so that I think a lot of people, when the ISO audits come around or whatever certifications or they're trying to get, they have like oh crap, we got to prepare for this and be ready. Whereas if you set your systems up to be that way in the first place, yes, they're still a little bit stressful to be in those audit situations, but really, like there's no reason not to pass if your systems are set up in the way that kind of forces compliance.
Absolutely. You have all the reports right at your fingertips. You say, all right, what's my on-time delivery, and how many cases did we have this year, and how many were positive feedback, how many were negative feedback? Did we resolve them all? What were the solutions?
They're all negative feedback about me still, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. Years later, we're still getting,
clients are still complaining about me.
Is Patrick still there? Yeah, no, we always had great feedback about you, Patrick. We're very fortunate and very blessed in that way that we get very little negative feedback. I think part of it is because it's not that we don't make mistakes. Again, this is a human-driven business. But by the way, mistakes happen whether it's AI or human. But that's one thing, is we stress a lot of things, but that's the one thing that we really, really think is important, is that if someone has an issue, a concern, you have to get to it immediately. You address it, you figure out what the cause of the problem was, and you resolve it. It's one of the things that I actually, people complain and whine about ISO registrations, and I think she's no longer with us, but God bless her, Phyllis Nash, she was one of our first implementers of the ISO program, and she said it's always business first, system second. In other words, the system has to work for the business. In other words, it has to provide some value. Otherwise, why are you doing it? Mm-hmm. I love that. She's a consultant trying to sell us services to put this system in place, and she's like, hey, if this doesn't do anything good for you, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was great.
That brings me back to a quote. I forget where I saw it. I think it was an athlete of some sort, but they said, I never lose. I win or I learn. Or some business person might have said it too. But I think you can get down in the dumps about those things, or you can kind of take them as a learning opportunity and be like, cool, it happened. Like, obviously, apologize, make it right. And then, okay, what are we going to do to make sure that won't happen again? I think, like you said, making a mistake once is acceptable, but making the same mistake twice probably isn't.
Absolutely. You have to own it. And I think, there was a similar story, Patrick, from a few years ago of Giannis. I can never say his name, Antetokounmpo from the Bucks. Someone asked him, they had lost the NBA championship. And he's like, do you feel like this is a failure? I think that was the question. You could tell he actually got kind of upset at first. And his answer was really great because he's like, why would I think this is a failure? We had a great season. He listed their record. We made it to the NBA finals. There's 30 other teams that did not make it to the finals. We're here. We had the opportunity. This was an amazing experience. Do I want to do better next time? Absolutely. And that's really, really the key.
Well, that's what's the old Edison one, right? He's like, I didn't not invent the light bulb. I learned 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
So many ways to spin that. And it's important. And I think, lastly, Patrick, as we get close to our time here, we're actually a little over it, but that's okay, is talent acquisition and retention. Like, I think if you think of employees these days, right, like you better have a pretty decent payroll system and way to, put your reimbursable expenses in and have time off. And again, because of cloud solutions, there's so many cool ones out there, right? We use Rippling, but there's Gusto, there's so many different ones that are out there, Paycom, and they all build in these things that are cool for the employee.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point of the people who are entering the workforce were raised on a more high-tech version of the internet than I think past generations of like my first exposure to the internet is the old like fax line ringing to log on to AOL with a CD. So it's a little bit different than now where it's open your laptop and you're online and it doesn't take you 15 minutes to connect. So I think that generation really knows their way around like internet and cloud-based applications and really just expects them to work quickly. So if you're not meeting that expectation, I think it's a big miss as an employer. Again, I know we talked about it, I think last time too. It's like, I think the expectation for a lot of people is that things just work and like they just have to work and they have to work fast.
And it has to be intuitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's gotta be easy to use.
Yeah. Anytime we look at systems these days, it's like we expect the buttons to be in a certain spot and the commands to be in a certain spot. There's sort of an accepted infrastructure. Absolutely. It's again, super important to the modern day business. I'm still shocked. I have friends of mine that still they do payroll the old fashioned way where they actually have an accountant that does the payroll and then they dial into the IRS to do their, now you can log into dial or log in to
The IRS
manually
is the internet. What?
they have the interwebs there, yes, and they you log in and do a manual transfer of the payment entry. It's like, why wouldn't you be with a payroll company? Like, what are you doing? I mean, even if you're a one person operation, a friend of mine who's a translator is one person operation. He uses a payroll company because he doesn't want to deal with it. He pays himself a salary through his corporation. I mean, it makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So the tools are there. You have to be willing to use them, and I think that's oddly enough in 2025 we still have some folks that are kind of raging against the machine, if you will. So anyway, Patrick, this is that time of the show. Biggest takeaway, and it can be either this episode or the last, since they were sort of joined at the hip.
Yeah, I think we talked about it on both of them, but really considering like your employer brand of like what it's like for people who work at that company, and what maybe is either antiquated or really slick systems say about you. It might be people might read between the lines of they're like, oh, these systems kind of suck, and like, why doesn't this company invest in like making my job easier for me, versus someone who comes in and sees like, holy cow, these systems are awesome. Like I get to focus on work I like doing. Those are two very different experiences for employees. And I think, like you said, like the tools have to do something for your business to add value. If you just have them to have them, it's a really big miss. So I think people see those things. So that could very well like be the reason someone leaves a job. They're like, systems weren't great. I got better systems elsewhere. like all other things equal. So really, that is part of the equation. And I think it's a pretty big part of the equation of the employer brand of like, this is stuff people have to work with every day. So like, it just has to be easy for them.
Absolutely. So, my biggest takeaway, because we talked about so much technology, right? This episode and the last. And I mean, we didn't dive super deep into, how to set them up or anything like that. But we brought up a lot of instances of different things that you can do. And I think the thing that I would stress is that, and it's dovetailing off of what you were saying, Patrick, which is from a business viewpoint, yeah, your employees don't want to do stuff in a super, super manual way. They want to do things efficiently. But think of the customer's viewpoint as well. Nobody's going to pay you to cut and paste. Nobody's going to pay you to do double entry into an accounting system. Like you can't say, oh, well, I'm just going to bill that back to the client. Client could care less.
You're leaving money on the table then because you're still putting in double the work for the same amount of money.
Absolutely. What customers are going to pay you for is when you create value for them. Like, hey, instead of spending time on double entering a sales order, I spent time on creating a glossary, which is going to create more consistent translations for you going forward. I did some research, and I think we can automate this aspect of what you're doing. Clients are going to pay you for that. They're not going to pay you for administrative work. Mm-hmm. No one, and your employees will thank you when you don't make them do hours and hours of crazy stuff, like manually entering invoices or something crazy like that. So anyway, for this episode of Translation Confidential, and Patrick, we didn't talk, 2 episodes, we didn't talk a whole lot about AI. We just talked about systems, I guess.
We're on AI hiatus.
Yeah, we'll probably
for
be
at
back.
least one episode.
Yeah, maybe, exactly. Maybe we'll talk about an abacus or something super old school next time, but
yeah, maybe diners.
Could be. My guess is we're going to be back on the AI train next time. We'll probably have something to talk about, I would imagine. But at any rate, for this episode of Translation Confidential, this is Peter Argondizzo and Patrick Daley signing off.